December 5th, 10th, 1944. Lady, Philippines. Rain hammered the jungle canopy like 1,000 steel drums. Thunder rolled over the ridgeline. And at the top of an unnamed hill overlooking the Mahanag region, Private First Class Dirk J. Vlug, 20 years old, mud-soaked, starving, and exhausted, found himself in a position no soldier ever wants. He was the last man left, the last American holding a vital defensive hill. A hill that, if it fell, would open the valley below for a Japanese counterattack that could overwhelm the entire U.S. advance on LEYT. The rain made everything feel heavier rifles. Packs, boots, but nothing was heavier than the truth Vlug faced as he crouched behind a half-collapsed log bunker. He knew they were coming. Hours earlier, his small detachment, part of the 126th Infantry Regiment, 32nd Red Arrow Division, had been hit by a wave of Japanese infantry supported by tanks, one of the few armored elements left on Lady. The enemy force was desperate. Lady was slipping from their control, and this hill was a launching point for their last major counteroffensive. The Americans had held through the morning, then the afternoon, then dusk. But one by one, casualties mounted. Men were pulled back. Others lay silent in the mud dot, and finally, just before sunset, the order came, fall back to the secondary line. But the radio operator was dead. The field telephone lines were cut, and Vlug never got the message. When the firing died and the jungle fell quiet, he waited. Ben waited more, then realized the truth. Everyone else was gone. He was alone a hill. The Japanese didn't know that yet. But they would soon. Lug wiped rain from his eyes and checked his ammunition. 5 grenades, 3 magazines for his M1 rifle, and a single M9 bazooka, the metal tube muddy and cold. He pulled it close, inspected it. The firing battery was still good. He didn't know it yet, but that bazooka was about to carve his name into history. Below him, the jungle rustled. Branches cracked. The soft rumble of engines rolled across the ground deep. Metallic growls, unmistakable even in the downpour tanks. Japanese Type 95 Hogo light tanks. At least 3 of them. Maybe more. Behind them, dozens, possibly hundreds of infantry moved in coordinated waves. Lug couldn't see them all, but he didn't need to. The 32nd Division estimated enemy forces in the region at 600 soldiers. Given the timing, the terrain, and the direction of approach, chances were high they were all converging on his hill, a full battalion. Against one man, Vlug's heartbeat slowed. Some men panic when the odds tilt too far. Others freeze. A rare few become sharper, quieter, colder. Vlug belonged to the 3rd group. He crawled to a better firing position, his body blending into the mud and roots. Rain dripped from the brim of his helmet. The jungle lit up suddenly as the first tank crested the slope, its spotlight sweeping the terrain. The hilltop bunker remained dark, still, silent. Vlug knew the Japanese doctrine well by 1944. Tanks pushed forward. Infantry followed. Grenadiers closed in to clear defenders. If he waited too long, they'd surround him. If he fired too early, he'd give away his position. He needed the perfect moment. The lead tank ground its way up the slope, treads chewing mud, turret turning toward the bunker. Vlug slid the bazooka over his shoulder. He steadied his breathing. He felt for the familiar weight of a rocket, cold and solid in his hand. The tank loomed closer. 30 yards, 20-10. Its machine gun rattled, spraying the bunker with a cascade of tracer fire. Dirt exploded around Vlug's boots. He kept still, teeth clenched, waiting for the turret to angle just a little more. Nothing more, he whispered to himself. Now. Vlug jumped from cover, the bazooka already aimed. The Japanese tank commander spotted movement, but too late, the rocket streaked forward, smashed into the tank's hull. and detonated in a burst of flame and shrapnel. The vehicle belched black smoke, and rolled backward down the slope. Infantry screamed below, confused, panicked. Blug didn't hesitate. He ditched the spent tube, loaded another rocket, repositioned to the right, and sprinted through mud to avoid retaliatory fire. A second tank pushed forward to take the first one's place. Its turret fired blindly at the bunker. Its machine gun swept the trees. They still thought multiple Americans held the WWII popped out from a new angle and fired his second rocket. It slammed into the turret ring, blasting the top hatch open in a molten spray. Flames erupted. The crew bailed out, clothes burning, running into the jungle. The Japanese infantry shouted orders. More movement surged uphill. Two tanks destroyed. Hundreds of enemies still coming. And Vlug stood alone on the ridge, soaked, exhausted, and breathing hard but unbroken. He grabbed his next rocket. The night was just beginning. The jungle below erupted after the second tank exploded. Shouts rose and the darkness orders barked in rapid Japanese. Boots splashing through mud, metal clanking as infantry rushed the slope. They still thought an American platoon was holding the hill. They had no idea it was a single 20-year-old soldier fighting in the rain, exhausted, soaked in mud, and carrying only a bazooka and his rifle. Private First Class Dirk. Lug crouched behind a root cluster as muzzle flashes rippled through the trees below him. Bullets snapped overhead. He felt the thump of grenades thrown blindly toward the bunker he'd abandoned. Minutes earlier. Good. Let them waste their ammunition. The third tank roared forward through the brush, pushing infantry aside as it climbed toward the hilltop. Its engine growled like a wounded animal. Its tracks carved deep ruts into the earth. Lug slid another rocket into the bazooka, feeling the click of the latch lock into place. His breathing steadied again. Rain streamed off his helmet as he raised the tube. He didn't fire immediately. He waited until the tank's spotlight swept past him, illuminating nothing but sheets of falling rain. Then he moved. He leaped from cover, planted his boots in the mud, and fired. The rocket slammed into the tank's right tread and detonated in a burst of sparks and flame. The vehicle jolted sideways, metal shrieking as the tread tore free. The driver tried to correct, but the tank spun, slid backward, and crashed into a tree. Infantry scattered. Some dropped to the ground. Others sprayed automatic fire toward the smoke. Vlug was already moving, reloading, sprinting, shifting positions so they couldn't pinpoint his location. He wasn't fighting like a man defending a hill. He was fighting like a ghost. The Japanese infantry regrouped quickly. They weren't inexperienced. Many had fought in New Guinea, the Philippines, and in Burma. They had seen difficult terrain, brutal fighting, and relentless American pressure. But what they hadn't seen before, what almost no one had, was a lone soldier, destroying armored vehicles with such precision. A fourth tank rumbled through the brush. Its gunner fired blindly in all directions, muzzle flash lighting the jungle in strobe-like bursts. Vlug ducked as a round chewed a chunk out of the tree beside him. He felt the shockwave of the hit. Through the bark. Close. Too close. But he wasn't backing down. He slung the bazooka over his shoulder, grabbed his rifle, and crawled through the undergrowth to reposition. A fallen log provided a momentary shield as he peeked through the ferns. The tank was closer now. It wasn't exposing its side profile like the last three. It was angling its armor forward, cautiously advancing. Smarter, slower, harder to kill. Lug exhaled. He waited. The turret turned slightly left. A small gap in the frontal armor where the tracks met the lower plate opened for just a second. 1 second was enough. Lug rose, stepped into the open, and fired his fourth rocket. The blast tore through the lower hull, and the tank belched flame from the seams around its turret. The vehicle rocked, then settled at an awkward angle as its engine died. The Japanese infantry roared in shock. 4 tanks gone. Nothing on the ridge but smoke, fire, and confusion. But Vlug wasn't celebrating. He was counting rockets. He had one left, and the fifth tank hadn't appeared yet. He moved again, weaving through the mud, ducking under low branches, sliding behind a jutting rock formation as bullets tore up the ground behind him. A hand grenade landed near his boot. He kicked it away instinctively. It detonated with a sharp crack that rang in his ears, through the ringing. He heard them, footsteps, yells, the metallic clatter of grenadiers, climbing the ridge. They were getting close. Vlug gritted his teeth. If infantry reached the top before the final tank did, he'd be overrun. He needed something big, something loud to buy time. As if answering his thought. The fifth tank's engine roared in the darkness. He slid the last rocket into the tube. There would be no second chance. This shot had to count. The tank pushed through the tree line, its hull scraping branches aside. Its turret pointed forward, coaxial machine guns sweeping the hilltop. The tank was so close now he could feel the engine. Vibrations through the earth. Vlug stepped into the open. The tank commander spotted him instantly. Machine gun fire erupted, sending fountains of mud skyward. Vlug didn't flinch. He aimed, breathed out, and fired. The rocket struck the tank square in the center of the engine compartment. A fireball erupted, blasting shrapnel outward as the vehicle lurched to a hard stop. Flames poured from the rear vents. The crew bailed, scrambling into the jungle. Vlug dropped the empty bazooka. His shoulder ached from the recoil. Smoke stung his nose. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from exhaustion. 5 tanks destroyed, alone. The Japanese infantry paused. He could hear confusion in their voices. They were unsure now, uncertain whether the hill was held by one man or an entire ambush unit. No one wanted to be the first to charge into the unknown. Then, in the distance, he heard it, the low thump of American mortar fire. The secondary line had realized the enemy was massing. Support was on the way, but the enemy wasn't done yet. The Japanese regrouped for one final push, hundreds of soldiers advancing in waves, determined to take the hill before U.S. reinforcements arrived. Vlug picked up his rifle. He had no rockets left, no heavy weapons, only an M1, 3 magazines, and the will to stand. The jungle darkened as the enemy surged forward. Grenades arced through the rain. Rifles fired from below. Boots pounded up the slick slope. For a moment, the entire hillside shook with the thunder of approaching feet. Private First-Class Vlug squared his stance, wiped rain from his eyes, and whispered, "All right, come on." The final assault had begun. Rain hammered the jungle like a war drum as the final Japanese assault surged toward the ridge. Hundreds of soldiers, grenadiers, riflemen, machine gun teams climbed the muddy slope in coordinated waves. Shouts echoed through the trees, mixing with thunder and the metallic clatter of equipment. Private First-Class Dirk Vlug pressed his back against a tree trunk, gripping his M1 rifle. No more rockets. No more tanks to stop. No reinforcements yet. Just one American, holding the last high ground before the valley. Muzzle flashes flickered below him like sparks rising from a forge. Rounds cracked past his helmet, slicing leaves from branches. Grenades thumped into the mud around him, shaking the earth. Vlug fired, ejected the clip, reloaded, fired again. Short bursts. Controlled breathing. Every shot counted. He wasn't trying to stop 600 men. He was trying to slow them, delay them, buy time for the rest of the regiment to regroup behind him. A Japanese squad flanked up the right side of the ridge, firing as they advanced. Vlug sprinted through the mud, slid behind a fallen tree, and opened fire. 3 soldiers dropped. The others retreated behind rocks, regrouping for another push. Another wave climbed the left side. Vlug shifted again, moving low through the brush, firing, then disappearing before their machine gun team could pin him down. To the Japanese, it must have seemed like multiple defenders were on the hill. Different angles. different firing points, different positions every minute, but it was just one man refusing to be fixed in place. A grenade landed near his knee. Lug kicked it downhill instinctively. It spun through the mud and exploded mid-slope, ripping a crater in the earth. Infantry scrambled up the damaged section, but the blast had slowed them. Lug fired into the confusion, dropping 2 more attackers. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating the hillside for a heartbeat. Silhouettes filled the slope, dozens of them like shadows. Rising out of the earth, the enemy came in a rush. Lug fired until his clip pinged out. He ducked, dodged, pivoted. A bayonet sliced past his shoulder. Another soldier lunged from the left. Lug slammed the butt of his rifle into him, knocking him down. Mud slicked his hands. Sweat stung his eyes. Rain blurred the world into streaks of gray, but he did not give ground. He slid behind another stump and reloaded. A machine gun burst, tore the bark to splinters inches above his helmet. Lug rolled to the side, snapped off 2 shots, and heard a scream from the gunner's position. Still, the enemy kept coming. 4 soldiers broke through the brush and charged. Lug fired twice, 2 fell. The other 2 rushed him, shouting. Lug swung his rifle like a club, struck one across the jaw, then grappled with the last man in the mud. They rolled, slipping and sliding down the slope. Lug pried the rifle loose, shoved himself free, and plunged the barrel forward. The soldier fell silent. Lug staggered to his feet, chest heaving. He slid back to the ridge line, boots sinking deep into the mud. He forced himself to keep moving forward, backward, sideways, anywhere but still. Gunfire flashed below. Voices rose. A new wave charged. He pressed against a root outcrop and fired again. 10 seconds later, he moved to a new position. Then another. Then another. He wasn't defending the hill like a fortress. He was defending it like a storm, constantly shifting, unpredictable. Impossible to pin down. The Japanese assault began to falter. Not from casualties alone, but from confusion. They didn't understand why the hill hadn't fallen yet. They didn't know how many Americans still held it. They couldn't coordinate under sporadic fire from multiple angles. And then finally it came. A distant, rising rhythm. A sound like pounding fists on a giant drummed out American mortar. The secondary line had zeroed in on the enemy buildup. Shells began to drop below the ridge, shaking the earth in violent, thundering pulses. Boom, boom, boomed out the jungle, lit up with fires. Explosions tore open the hillside. Trees snapped. Dirt rained down. Enemy formations scattered under the barrage. Lug ducked into a shallow depression as shrapnel whistled overhead. But he didn't feel fear. He felt the tide turning. American voices echoed through the rain. Push up the line. Move, move. Take the ridge. Friendly infantry advanced up the slope toward his position. Machine gun teams laid suppressive fire. Mortar crews walked rounds up the hillside with surgical precision. The Japanese assault, once 600 strong, broke into splintered groups, fleeing into the jungle. Lug stayed low as American soldiers reached the crest. A sergeant spotted him first. Holy hell. How long have you been up here alone? Lug lowered his rifle, breath shaking, since the first tanks came. Another soldier stared at the burning wrecks below. You did all that? Lug shrugged, exhausted. I didn't want them taking the hill. Word spread quickly. Officers arrived. Medics tried to pull him back for treatment. Lug resisted at first, still wound up, still watching the tree line, but finally allowed himself to be guided to the rear dot by nightfall. The entire ridge was secure. 5 Japanese tanks destroyed. Hundreds of infantry repelled. One soldier holding the line until help arrived. For his actions on that day, Private First Class Dirk, J. Lug would later receive the Medal of Honor. The citation described courage beyond expectation. His comrades called it something simpler. He refused to let the enemy pass. And history remembers him as the soldier who stood alone against tanks. against hundreds of enemy soldiers, against the impossible, and held the hill when no one else was left to do it.